All right, looks good. All right. Wesley, that's the name I saw a while ago. Hope you're doing well too. Well, welcome to the latest Backcountry Journeys photography webinar. As you can see on the screen here, I'm Russell Graves, and I've been doing a lot of these lately, but I'm going to take a little bit of time off after this one today. I've got a little traveling to do with Backcountry Journeys, so heading to Alaska later this week, heading on to other places later in the fall. So I'm really excited about the fall trip. And really, you hear me complaining about this all summer long, or not complaining, but just making note of it, because I live where I live and it gets hot where I live in the summertime. But I'm looking forward to getting to some cooler temperatures that we're going to have when I head up to Alaska later this week, because it's been, we're kind of in the roller coaster part of the year this year. We'll have a couple of really nice days, then it gets really hot for a few days. And part of Texas I live, it's humid, and it's mornings are pretty muggy and the afternoons get better, but by the evening time it gets muggy once again because it gets really still. So glad everyone's joining me today. Let me tell you a little bit about the webinar. If you're brand new to join us, I always like to make these as much of a dialogue as I can and not necessarily a monologue. So as I go through these things, if you have any questions or comments about any of the pictures or anything I've said, just pop it into the Q&A. And then I will address it as I go through the webinar. I don't really like waiting until the end because I like answering questions when it's fresh on everybody's mind. I think it's a little more valuable that way. So feel free to ask away or comment away on whatever you want to know or whatever you need clarification on or whatever. I do my best to try to clarify things as succinctly as I can when I go through these things. But as we all know, communications is a tricky thing, and sometimes I do a good job of explaining things, and sometimes I need to improve a little bit. So if you need me to clarify something a little more, be sure to let me know that. Also, this webinar, it's a little different than the ones I do in the past. Most of the time, it's all relegated to what you see on the screen on the presentation that I'm bringing you. But today we'll have a couple of times when I've got to switch over and share a different screen with you. So there's going to be a little bit of time in that as I switch things over, and the lag happens when I'm having to just switch from one screen to the next and make sure everything's saving correctly. So if you see some glitches whenever I switch over, just let me know. And also, I try to be mindful that there is a delay when you hear this. So when I asked you guys earlier if you could hear me, it probably took me, I'm going to say 10 or 15 seconds to see your responses. So knowing that there's a little bit of a delay, I'll try to be mindful of that when you type in a question. I see it, and then we go back and forth between things. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started. Again, simple photo hacks to improve your photography. And these are just some really simple kind of tricks and a few computer techniques that you can use to help improve your photography game. There's not a lot of them in here. I mean, there's probably, because I've got to be mindful of the time as well. And I really like to talk, so I can talk for a long time on each one. It's not like I'm going to inundate you with 40 or 50 things to remember. Really, I try to take it down to about I think 6 or 7, really kind of things you can focus on each and every time you go out to shoot wildlife or nature photos. And I think if you pay attention to some of these things, and they're easy things to control. I think once you pay attention to some of these things, you're instantly going to see your pictures getting better. A couple of these tricks are things that I've developed on my own, and most of these tricks are things I've kind of developed on my own as time goes along. A couple of things you're going to see in here are actually things that I've seen when I've been on backcountry journey tours, and I see some common issues that people a lot of times may have with their cameras. So I'll address those as we go through here. And one more thing, some of these take a little longer to go through. Some are pretty quick and pretty simple. So again, if you have any questions as I go through this, just feel free to pop them in there and let me know as we go through. Before I get going, let me see. Got a question already. I'm going to go ahead and answer this. Steve asked, ever been to Alaska in April to photograph muskox? No, never have been. That's on one of the list things I want to do, Steve. So appreciate you asking that. So here we go. I always like showing a lot of pretty pictures that I've taken. So Well, I think they're pretty. So I always like to show a lot of pictures. These aren't necessarily any photo hacks, but again, when I go out and shoot pictures like this, some of the things we'll be talking about today are exactly some of the things I do. And this is one of the first one is one of the things that I see a lot of people out. And in fact, one of the main ways that we correct issues in the field is right here. This is the diopter on the back of your camera. Let me grab. I took a picture of this camera this morning. If you look on the back of your camera, oops, it's backwards here, but they've got this little dial here. A lot of them, and they're different places. My cameras are Canons. But these diopters they're made to correct the way you see the viewfinder inside the camera. And if that thing gets off, every time you look at through your camera, the viewfinder looks blurry. And they're made to correct for people like me. I wear glasses when I need to read up close, but they're only reading glasses. But if I had some other kind of a visual impairment, or I say impairment, visual issue that needs to be corrected, you can dial this dial in to adjust to your vision, like +1, -1, or whatever the settings are through there. But what happens a lot of times is you wag these cameras around in the field, they get bumped and that diopter will get off. And then as the more and more it gets off, the more and more it gets out of whack. When you look through your viewfinder, it looks out of focus. Now, and I've seen this. This is the problem I see probably more than anything else when we're in the field, if guests are having issues, because again, it always starts with my pictures on my camera look in focus, but they don't look in focus when I look through the camera. And so, and it causes you to always try to adjust the focus. And more often than not, this is it. Now, and that's the thing. Your camera can still autofocus and it'll still autofocus accurately. But if you ever have a need to try to manually focus it, if this isn't set right, it will absolutely drive you crazy. Now, you can notice there on Canon, they have got a handy dandy dial on the dial that will help you line it up to where just the center, the zero compensation is on the diopter. But some of the other cameras, I think, and I'm not going to say it's universal among the brands, but I looked at a Sony a few weeks ago, I think, and they didn't have that dead center mark. And so what I had to do is just click through the settings and figure out, okay, this thing has 25 clicks. So 12 is right in the middle. So I'd have to count 12 clicks over and then lock it into place there. So again, always check the diopter, make sure that thing is set dead center. That is photo hack number 1. Be thinking about how I took the picture of that rattlesnake striking the camera. And then we'll talk about that one later on. That was another photo hack I did. Here's another thing too I found extremely helpful is calibrate your camera's display. Again, this is one of those issues that came about when we're in the field and people are having issues with trying to get their pictures right and can't figure out why what they see on the back of the camera doesn't necessarily match what they see in when they get back to the computer. And what I always do, and again, this is the back of this. Oh no, this is the back of a different camera I messed with this morning. But if you go through your settings on the different cameras, you'll have you can't calibrate your camera's display as finely as you can your computer display. But really, what I'm trying to do is trying to have a close approximation of what the picture looks like on the camera when I take it is going to be pretty close to the way I see it when I get back to the computer. And so what I'll do there is I'll just hold my camera up next to my computer and see on this, if you look on the picture here, you can see this LCD brightness on my camera. This is a Canon 5D Mark II. You can set it to auto where it'll automatically adjust. But I've found myself, if it gets on auto, I found myself looking at pictures thinking they're too dark because it bases the way it looks on the ambient lighting. So I'll switch it to manual, and all I'll do is adjust the brightness of my screen to try to match as close as I can to my computer at home. So that way, when I take a picture and I'm looking back at them while I'm in the field, I can at least approximate what that picture is going to look like once I get it back on the computer back at home. And that's a pretty good little hack there too that a lot of people don't think about, but it really, really does make a difference, especially on how much you worry about in the field about how much you worry about how good your pictures are, because again, if they look pretty good on the camera, you know when you get them back to the computer, they're probably going to be okay. I haven't seen any answers yet on the, I'll go back on the rattlesnake picture. What was the photo? I don't talk about it in this presentation, but be thinking about how I might have shot that picture right there. I don't recommend you do this at home. If you're going to do it out in the wild somewhere, but at home, don't bring rattlesnakes into your house. Here's one where I'm going to have to switch back and forth. You know, a lot of times when you're shooting pictures of wildlife in the outdoors, you can't really control the lighting all the time. And we've all had that time when we're out shooting pictures and we've got a dull gray sky. There's not a lot of lights. It's just not a really good situation to take pictures. So if you'll, hang on, okay. If you will bear with me for a second, let me switch screens here. Here we go. So I've got a few pictures already loaded up in this in a quick collection in Lightroom, but a picture like this is common of what you may take when you're in the field. It's just low light, the sky's uninteresting. There's just not a lot of good contrast in the image at all, and so a lot of times I'll still take a picture like that. And really, this is one of those really simple things that you can do. If you take a picture like this, and again, there's no color in the sky, there's nothing, but let me show you a way. If we go to develop in Lightroom, and all I'm going to do is do 2 or 3 slides, and we're going to make this picture look 100% better. So the first thing I'm going to do is on the blacks, I'm going to just try to bring my blacks all the way to the left. So in other words, I'm trying to make everything that's close to black even blacker. And by the way, if you're asking any questions while I'm doing this, I can't see the question panel. So if you'll just hang with me, I'll go back and look at the questions in a minute while I'm looking at these. So I'm going to bring the blacks all the way down. And then one more thing I'm going to do is just adjust the exposure just a little bit, try to underexpose it. So we've got the makings of a silhouette, but we still don't have a lot of color in the sky because everything in the background is gray. This cormorant is black. It just doesn't look good. And so then I'm going to go up to a place that a lot of people don't think about, and that's the white balance. And so look, I can either give it one look if I go to the cool side with white balance, or I can go to the warm side. I can make it look more like blue hour silhouette, or I can make it look more like right at sunset silhouette. So we can see that quick. That's the way the picture came in, and that's the way we finished it up. Here's the way it came in. All we did was adjust the blacks, adjust the exposure, and then adjust the temperature, the color temperature. And then we've got a pretty cool looking silhouette there. And if I go to the next one here, it's the same way. This is a frigate bird we took on the Florida Everglades trip. And this has a little bit of detail in it. And, you know, you could try to do high key where the background's really blown out and almost looks like a studio shot. But, you know, this is how the picture came out of the camera right here when I took it. And so it's a bad picture like it is, but you can see a little bit of a detail in the beak. You can see a little bit of eye, a little bit of feather detail. But again, all I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to crank down the blacks all I can. Again, I'm going to make the black areas blacker. And then on the exposure, I'm going to bring it down a little bit to try to crush any of the reflections I have. And then the third thing, I can just adjust the white balance and get it where I want it, and really just all of a sudden make a picture that's terrible into something that's at least kind of interesting to look at. So I do that a lot of times when you've got something skylighted and it's an uninteresting sky. and it's just not going to make a good picture at all, take the picture anyway, make a couple of simple adjustments when you get back into Lightroom, and it really does make all the difference in the world. So let me switch back here to the presentation. Here we go. All right, got a few questions coming in. Let me go through and answer some of these. We had a couple of answers on the snake question. Sue says remote trigger, close. And then Cliff says snake pick, do you use zoom from a safe distance and then put a bait in there? No, actually, when I took that picture, let me go back to that picture. When I took that picture, the snake actually struck the camera. But what I did here was I put the camera actually on a big long monopod, and I fired it with a trigger from the back of the monopod, and then was able to get it close to the snake. I almost stepped on him. That's when I spotted him. So he was pretty rattled up when I found him like that. So got a couple more questions coming in here. Cheryl says, do you shoot with the Canon R5 mirrorless? I don't, Cheryl, but she says, I'm noticing issues with the ISO shooting up in shade or low light, which it shouldn't do. Looking to send the camera into Canon Professional Service for review. You might want to, if it's set on automatic ISO, sometimes it'll do that. Usually I'm not a fan of automatic ISO in general. I usually just set the ISO at a number and leave it there. So you might, before you send it in, Cheryl, you might check on that to see if the auto ISO is engaged. And then Shanda says, I know you're going for a silhouette with the cormorant, but why would you want to take out the detail? Could you not do that while keeping in the detail? You know, really, Shanda, you could. It'd take a lot more work than what I really like doing anyway in post-processing. You know, I had my detail shots of the cormorants that were in better light. And so, you know, for me, it's just a way to again take a bad situation and make it a little bit better. I mean, you could try to get the detail in it, but at the same time, you're still going to have a pretty uninteresting sky in the end. So for me, just adding a little bit of color to the sky and just making it go silhouette, it was the best option. But you know, I guess I may try that later on to see if you can bring detail out and still change the color of the sky. I'm sitting there thinking through it. I don't know if I've got the capabilities of being able to do that or not. I don't know if I'm good enough at the post-processing to be able to do that. But I think with that white balance, unless you take it into Photoshop, that white balance is going to be a global effect. And so even if you bring some detail in, that white balance is going to affect the way those details look. And Cheryl says you've done that, but it still does it. Yeah, it might be time to send that camera in, Cheryl, for a look at from Canon. Back in the old days, they used to make a right angle finder for cameras, and when you put it on it, it'd go on the back, and it was like a little periscope where you have to look down in the camera and to be able to see through it. But now with a lot of these cameras, they have these articulating screens. And the thing I love about these articulating screens is you can open them up like that and then put them where you can see them from below and use them at really, really, really low angles without having to lay on your belly or get in the mud, and to be able to shoot unusual angles like this one right here. And then conversely, you can also use it to shoot high angles. This picture here is a shot I took of May apples in the Smoky Mountain National Park. And May apples are a really short-lived plant that occur in the spring in the southern hardwoods. I don't know how far north they grow, but I know they're here in Texas, in the part of Texas where I live. They're all over the South, but they'll grow a little bitty flower on the bottom side of those leaves, and then they'll grow a little fruit on the bottom side of those leaves. But the unusual thing about mayaples is when they grow up, they'll make like a carpeted area that look pretty cool when you look at them from above. And these plants are only maybe a foot tall, but when you look at them from above, they look pretty neat because they just grow in just a big patch. But I always thought it was cool when you look at them from below, especially when they're backlit like these are. And the way to achieve that is to just use that articulating screen and to get your camera as low as you can, and then use that viewfinder to be able to look up and compose your shot like that. Natalia asked, how would you control the focus in this situation? If you're referring to the picture I'm showing you right now, the way I would control the focus in this situation would be to just set it on autofocus, or I could manually focus it and pre-focus it, because really the camera is only, I shot this with the wide angle lens and the camera is only a couple of feet away from the first ones, if that. So I was trying to get a lot of sky in the picture, and so I can either pre-focus or my camera, just set my camera on autofocus and it'll focus on this. This picture here, this is just a guess. It was probably shot at about f/16, so you're going to get plenty of depth of field in it, so you don't really have to worry about the focus in the far back. You can look at those trees in the back and see they're relatively in focus, but really the star of the show are all the mayaples up front. And so if it gets a little soft as it gets to the back, that's okay too. And I mentioned I did not put a example in here, but I mentioned briefly that when you're using that angle finder to shoot low, you can also flip it the other way. So on this camera here, as you can see, I can flip it down like that. So instead of flipping it up where I can look down on it, I can flip it down, and then I can use it to get it really high and compose it like that. A lot of times what I'll do if I want to get kind of a high angle at something, I'll put it on a monopod or put it on my tripod and then use the remote trigger to be able to fire it. And it's good in the sense that you can get, if you're shooting an angle like that, you can get an angle that's as well. I'm 5'9", so I can probably reach with my tripod up about 9 feet high. It's a really low angle. It's not like shooting from a drone, but it's still, in some cases, it'll give you a chance to just change up the way the scene looks, shoot at a different angle other than just at your eye level. And it gives you a lot of options using those articulating screens. Here's another one too, and it took me forever to figure this one out. But on days when it's overcast, when the sky's uninteresting, well, the easy thing to do is just try to eliminate the sky. And I do that with wildlife shots. I do it with landscape shots, especially. It's most of the time when I'm out shooting landscape shots, or when I'm in a place to shoot landscape shots, it seems like I never get a good in between. It's either completely cloudy or completely blue sky, and nothing really in between. And so if the sky is not very interesting, I try to include just a little bitty sliver in the top of the picture of the sky, just to kind of put it in context, like of the Smoky Mountains here, a little bit of sliver of the sky, just so you know there's a sky there to kind of frame the image up overall. But for the most part, I just leave the sky out as much as I can. I don't make the sky the star of the show at all. And when you're shooting pictures of wildlife, let me back up. Like this picture here of this feral pig, this picture was taken on a cloudy day. And instead of shooting at a really low angle where you'd get some sky and get just an uninteresting gray sky in the background, I changed my angle just a little bit to be, a little bit higher than the pig. And that way I can eliminate the sky and be able to take a more interesting picture and a more well-lit picture. Shelley asked, what's your feeling about replacing a boring sky in Photoshop? I'm kind of agnostic about the practice. I've just never really done it myself a whole lot. I've played with it some, and the results I get aren't very convincing to me. They're not very good. So I just my default, if you've listened to these webinars before, my default is to always try to do whatever I can to get the best shot I can while I'm in the field. And then that way I don't have to try to do any tricks later on to fix that. So again, my feeling is that I'm just not very good at it. I don't default that way in the beginning, but I'm guessing I've seen pictures where people have replaced the skies and they're so good at it, I just didn't know it. See, here's the opposite of what I was talking about earlier. There's this picture here. It's on a bluebird sunshine day, and so when I tried to compose it of the Teton range, you know, the best thing I can do is just try to compose it where there's something a little more interesting in the foreground and try to eliminate as much sky as I can to still make the picture work. Here's another thing too. Now I'm going to show you some examples using flowers, but really these reflectors work good for a lot of reasons other than just flowers. But I'll always carry one of those 5-in-1 reflectors. And if you don't want to know what a 5-in-1 reflector is, they're just a little super light disc shape. It's like a circle. If you don't know what one is, if you think about those, my first reflector I ever had was one of those car windshield shades that you can put, you know, people put in their windshield when it's sunny out to help reflect the light away from it and cool off the inside of their car. Well, you can buy one of these. They're primarily made for portrait photography, but they work great in the outdoors. And what the reflector can do is, if you've got when I'm taking flower photography, for example, and that's why I use these pictures, I'll do usually one of two things. One, I try to find a flower that's in the shade, and then because it's easier to control in the shade in ambient light. If you've ever done flash photography before, one of the easiest things to do is put your subject in shade. The background can be in sunlight, but as long as the subject's in shade, you can manipulate the light to the level that you want it to be to make it match the background. And that's exactly what I did here. And so if I've got a reflector, I can find a flower that's in the shade, or use something like my pickup, or use myself, put my body in the way to reflect this. I mean, to put a shadow over it, and then use the reflector to bounce some sunlight back into it. And that way I can make the lighting a whole lot more even and put the shadows where I want them to be. If you notice this little cone flower here, the shadow is kind of falling off to the right side of that seed head. And I was able to shoot really low depth of field and get the look I wanted to look in this picture here. And here's some more examples here. My favorite colors to use are on the 5-in-1 reflector I have. It has a silver side, a gold side, a white side, a black side, and then you can take the color reflectors off and just be translucent, where it makes it like a scrim, where you can it's like high overcast clouds. It doesn't completely block the light, but it really softens the light. The picture on the left, I use just the scrim to soften the light. I can't remember that's a Gara, I think is the name of that flower. And then I just use it to soften the light a little bit. And then the picture on the right, you can see the background's a little bit dark. And so just to kind of bring it up and make the flower stand off from the background, I just bounced a little light using the reflector back into it. But the reflector I have is probably, I don't know, about, you can't see my hands, probably, I don't know, 2-3 feet across. It's pretty small, weighs less than a pound, folds up and sticks into my backpack. And again, I carry it everywhere with me that I go, because I may be out to try to shoot pictures of wildlife, but if I see a really cool plant or flower, one of the things you may or may not know about me is I'm a plant nerd, and I love taking pictures and discovering new plants and species wherever I go and trying to document them. And not just trying to take just a snapshot of them, but try to take a real meaningful picture, whether it's a flower, whether it's a grass or a forb or a woody plant or any other kind of species. I like trying to learn about them. In fact, one of the long-term projects that I've got going on right now, I say long-term, here on Hackberry Farm, where I live in Northeast Texas, we closed on the land. It'll be 2 years ago in December, we closed on this land. And starting about a year ago, I started documenting all the plant, animal, reptile, birds, all the species of living creatures that are on this property. And right now, it's one of the fun things I do for relaxation, if you can believe it or not. That's how nerdy I am. Right now, I go out a lot of evenings with my wife, and we'll go walk around the property or go drive around on our buggy. And we will look for new plants we haven't discovered yet. And so far, I'd have to count the list. I think we've probably I've documented and photographed probably 170 different plant species on the property. And I haven't even started on the fungi yet, of the mushrooms and stuff like that. And I mean, it's just pretty incredible when you pay attention to what's just right around you, how many more subjects you can find. Natalia asked, do you use a macro lens for flower pictures? I'll give you a little bit of a hint right now, but that's a webinar to come I'm going to do. I do not use a macro lens for flower pictures. In fact, I'm going to reach over here because I've got one set up right here. Here's the trick to the flower pictures. I use a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And then this is my poor boy's macro photography. It's 3 parts here. I got the camera. And then there's the magic right there. See? There's no lens in that. That's called an extension tube. And I am no optical physicist, but what the extension tube does, depending on the size, will turn a non-macro lens like this old 70 to 200 millimeter lens into a macro lens. It'll let you focus really, really, really close. And so when I do these flower pictures, that's how I do it. And there's 2 reasons I've never bought a macro lens. One, I've just never bought a macro lens because early on, macro wasn't something I was really interested in, but now I'm super interested in it. And in fact, in the morning, I'm going out to try a brand new technique I've never done before. So I hope to make that into a webinar later on, because if it turns out like I hope it might, it's going to be really, really, really cool. But so one reason I've just never bought a macro lens. And number 2, I guess I could rent one or borrow one, but I just never have. But the picture on the left with those really good out of focus backgrounds, I know I can achieve that with, and there's another example there. I know I can achieve these backgrounds with the lenses I already have by just putting an extension tube. And what that extension tube will do will allow you to focus from on those flowers right there, probably a foot away, I'm guessing. So it'll get you pretty close. Again, it makes a regular lens behave like a macro. Don't know why it does it, but it does. So that's all I know. So there's my answer there, Natalia. Here's another one where I've got to switch over on the screen I'm sharing. So bear with me here, but when you're shooting pictures of birds in flight, always shoot a picture of the empty sky. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. So give me a second. Let me switch back over here. Switch screen. Okay, here's where we left off earlier. And I've got these preloaded here. Oops, let me go back. Hang on, sorry about that. I'll flub that one up. Let me share a different screen, switch screen. Here we go. Let me go back to where we were. So if you notice here, this is a screenshot of Lightroom. When you can see there that as I'm taking pictures, I'll include just a picture of the sky. And I do that all the time. So you'll take a few bird pictures and take a picture of the blank sky with the same settings you're taking the bird pictures. Take bird pictures, take a setting of the blank sky. And the reason why is, now I'm going to switch back over. The reason why is this right here. Now, as hard as I try to get everything composed perfectly 100% of the time. But the truth is I can't. And so the reason why I take this picture of the blank sky in the same light is it's really simple to do this. Now, I'm not a power user of Photoshop at all. But here's one thing I discovered you can do that can really help you salvage some pictures that aren't that great and then make it into something that great. So I've got these open in Lightroom. So all I'm going to do is click this picture, and then I'm holding down, I use Mac, so I'm holding down Command, and I'm just going to select the picture of the empty sky. So I've got both of those pictures selected. Then I'm going to go to Photo, and there's a shortcut to do this. I don't know what it is though, but you're going to go up to the Photo menu, Edit In, and then I'm going to edit these. It looks like Command E. So I'm going to edit these in Adobe Photoshop. So in other words, I'm going to click on those, and then it's going to do its thing. It's going to take a second here to get loaded up, but any second now, it's going to take those two pictures and it's going to open them in Photoshop. So let me see if it's, no, still waiting on it here. There we go. So now they're open in Photoshop, and you can see I've got the picture there. Good shot, perfect exposure, or is pretty dang perfect. It's in focus. Everything looks good, except the only thing is the composition is terrible because the bird is flying into the edge of the frame. And then so we've got our blank frame there. Well, what I can do here is with a few simple steps, I can choose my magic eraser in Photoshop, and then I can just click it and tell it erase the background. Just pretty quick like that. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. Okay. So then and I'm doing this quick just so you can see. And then the second thing I'm going to do is select this marquee tool. And then with the background gone, I'm just going to try to click in as tight as I can. And I didn't do a very good job. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to click in as tight as I can on that bird and just select that. So from there, I'm just going to edit. I can do this Command C. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go to my blank screen, and then Command V, which will paste it. And then I've just moved that bird. Same sky the bird was flying around in, but just now I can improve the composition. And instead of making it like that, which is a poor composition, I can bring it over to this side where it makes a little bit more from a makes a little bit more sense from a compositional standpoint. So it's really that simple. And then when you close it, and I'm not going to save this in case I need to go back through it again. So that's where I like it. It blends in well. It's on this. I don't feel like it's cheating because it's on the exact same sky. Really, within a couple seconds after I shot pictures of the bird, I took a picture of the sky. And so everything fits. I'm not replacing the sky that didn't exist there. It still exists in that spot, but it's just I'm improving the composition. And then when I close that, it's going to ask me if I want to save it. And if I said yes, it will actually save all of that finished image back into Photoshop. So let me jump back over here. And then, oops. Yeah, there we go. Let me jump back over here into this screen and make sure. Cliff asks, will the edit, erase, copy work in Lightroom? I've never tried it in that, and the reason why I haven't, Cliff, is because that magic eraser in Photoshop works so quick and easy to do. And I'll walk everybody through that again here in a second. But that magic eraser, what that magic eraser does, it picks all the complementary light colors around that, and it just deletes them instantly. And so that's why I do it like that. So it may do like you're talking about. I've just never tried it. So if no one has any, I don't see any more questions popping up on that yet. So I'm just going to go through that one more time with you so you can see it again. So let me switch screens. Okay, again, and this time I'm going to save it. So again, all you do is in Lightroom, you click both of those. both the pictures you want to edit, photo, edit in Adobe Photoshop. And it's going to take both those pictures and open them up for me. Oops, it's got to load Photoshop again because I closed it a minute ago. Shouldn't take long though. Okay, there's the first picture. There's the second picture. So there's both pictures loaded. Again, all I'm going to do is use my magic eraser tool. Click on the background. Sometimes it won't get it. You might have to click around for it to get the best background. I'm going to start that over because it didn't do as good a job as I want it to. Okay, that's better. Sometimes you got to click multiple times to get it. And again, I could spend a little more time on this. I'm not going to, just for the sake of time. But you could spend a little more time cleaning all that up, I guess, because there's a background eraser tool that you can use. And you could clean all this up, but I'm not going to. So all I'll do now is, once I've got the background erased like I want it to be erased, I'm just going to click on that, select just the eagle, copy it, Command C, paste it onto the empty sky, and then I can use this little cross tool up here to move it around where I want to move it around. And then here's what I'll show you. So when you're done, you can, if I say I want to close this image, it's going to ask me if I want to save it. I'll say yes. And then it should give me a, it's saving it right now. And then I'm not going to save that one. So there, it did it. So when you notice it popped up there. So when I close Photoshop, it automatically takes that image that I just edited and I put it into Lightroom inside my catalog without me having to stick it somewhere, then manually import it back in. And that's one of the beauties of of using Photoshop, exporting out of Lightroom into Photoshop to be able to edit it, and that way it'll all save it back in there. It just saves you a couple of steps. But there's a difference. Same picture, same sky the bird was taken in, and just all I did was just take the bird out of one sky, put it on the same sky where it was flying. You can even notice the clouds in the background. The clouds are super, super similar. Because again, when I'm out taking pictures of birds in flight, one of the key things I do is when I'm out there is after I've shot a burst of one bird, I'll just instinctively shoot a picture of the blank sky where that bird just was. And this is the reason why, is because as much as I try to be perfect when I'm out in the field, it's just impossible, especially when you're talking about something like bald eagles in flight. So let me switch back over so I can see if anybody has any questions. Okay, no other questions came through on that. So if you have any more, just feel free to pop them in there, and we'll keep going through them. And this is really the big thing here. This is the best piece of advice I can give anybody. Y'all, if you've watched these webinars before, undoubtedly you've heard me tell the story that I started taking pictures when I was young. I'm 51 now. I started taking pictures when I was probably 16 or 17, had my first pictures in a magazine when I was 19, and started making money off taking pictures. And so I've been doing not only photography for a long time, but the business of photography for a long time. And for the first 15 years I shot pictures, I didn't experiment much. I kind of stayed in my lane of just doing what I knew how to do, that I could get the highest percentage of keeper images for. And the reason for that is it costs money to make mistakes. It hurt to make mistakes. Back in the day when I shot slide film for all the clients I had, it cost $12 a roll for film and processing for 36 pictures. And so let me do the math here on my calculator. That's 12 divided by 36. So it costs 33 1/3 cents per picture to take 36 pictures. And so when you're young and you don't have a lot of resources and you're trying to learn the whole business and everything that you're doing to try to get going, it was just expensive to take pictures. And then when digital finally got to the point it was a good medium, and it made sense for me to switch from shooting film to shooting digital, then experimenting became a lot more enjoyable and a lot more accessible and a lot more practical, to tell you the truth. And so even today, when I still experiment a lot on different techniques. One of the hacks I did include in this is I use GoPro cameras a lot now, especially I don't know if you guys saw this on the tribe, but a couple of weeks ago I posted some underwater images of some salmon, or no, some underwater video of some salmon swimming upstream. And I'll do this again. And when I go to Katmai this week, I'll take the same pictures. And I use those GoPros because they've got it's a pretty good little camera. They've got a pretty good sensor, but I'll use those GoPros to put underwater, and I'll never have to get wet because I'll put them on the end of a monopod, put them on the end of a tripod, and be able to hold them underwater and get them pretty close to fish. And so that's just, I learned that by just experimenting, by thinking about, okay, I've got this camera, what all can it do? Some of the macro techniques I've been working on, I got it from experimenting, just trying out, what if I put this extension tube on this 500 millimeter lens? Will it be good for taking pictures of other stuff besides little bugs? Well, found out it's pretty good for taking pictures of dragonflies. We've on our farm, we've got a field right out in front of our house that's it's historically been a hay field, but we're in the process of converting it to native grasses. But for this last season, before we make the conversion next year, the guy who has been cutting hay, he came and cut the hay on it the other day. So all the hay's laid down in the field that's right in front of our house. Well, across the way, I've got a feeder over there to feed birds and feed whatever other kind of wildlife wants to come into the field. And so I've noticed there's a wild pig been coming in that feeder every evening when it goes off. And so I told my wife yesterday, I said, I think I'm going to try to rig up a remote camera and use, I don't know if y'all remember those or not, these things or not, but they're called pocket wizards. Got a couple of pocket wizards that are supposed to be able to fire. You send a radio signal and you can trigger a camera from like 1,500 feet away. So I'm going to put pocket wizards on the cameras, set the camera up at a really cool angle, maybe a low angle, probably a low angle, maybe set up some strobes and be able to do like a little studio where as animals move into that, I can sit on the front porch and enjoy a beer in the evening when the sun goes down, and then take pictures of wildlife that are 400 yards away. So, but that's the thing, just always be willing to experiment, always be willing to try to push these cameras to their limits. And I hate saying this word, you guys maybe can help me come up with a different answer, or a different phrase to use, but the old saying, think outside the box, I think that's probably appropriate. I just hate using that term, think outside the box. So I am winding down on this presentation now. The always experiment is really my last slide, but I always encourage you to stay in touch. After last week's webinar that we did, I encourage people, or after every webinar I do, I encourage people to stay in touch. But last week got some great questions after the fact that once people had a chance to digest, or once they went back and watched the presentation, they had further questions. And so that's why I always give out my contact info. If you want to stay in touch beyond this webinar, be sure to stay in touch. Got a couple of questions coming in. Tom says, what size extensions do you use? Tom, I'd have to get up and get one of them. This one here, and I'm guessing that this Canon set only comes in with 2 tubes. And so I've got a 12 millimeter tube, and I think the other one is a 25 millimeter tube. And so together, if you put them together, you can focus really, really close with those things. But if I'm shooting plants, I usually use the 12 millimeter. If I'm shooting something like bugs, I'll use the 25 millimeter because I can get a little bit closer and it gives me more of a, and I'm ignorant on all these macro terms like life size or 1-to-1 and all that. I don't know them good enough to be able to explain them all, but it seems to me like once you use the bigger extension tube that it gives you a more life size image in the frame. So those are the ones I use, but I know you can buy sets that have 3 extension tubes. I'm not sure what the other size is. And then EJ says, I use a floaty with the 18-inch lead and let the GoPro drift down the creek. Was able to see the fish swimming naturally for about 100 feet drift. Great low light capability. Yeah, that's the thing I'm talking about, EJ, on experimenting. Those GoPros have really made it possible to do stuff like that and put cameras in places that you couldn't before. And I'm a certified scuba diver. I've got all the underwater housing stuff. I could do everything. I could do all the underwater pictures that I do with with my underwater stuff, but it's pretty easy just to throw the GoPro in and take it along instead of having to worry about the underwater housing and all the stuff there. Plus, since those GoPros are inherently waterproof, I've never ruined one by getting in water. But my cameras, I've drowned a couple of DSLRs by the lens port or something coming loose while you're underwater and your housing gets flooded out. And then Chuck says, yeah, and by the way, if you guys have any tips along these ways, feel free to put them on the screen and I'll read them. I mean, I've got time. I left enough time for Q&A, and I'll go well beyond if we're still having this conversation. Chuck says, something to try in your free time. The find object tool works great to isolate people. I'm pretty sure it will find the eagle and automatically create a mask to isolate the eagle. Something to try. And that's in Photoshop. I'll try that, Tom. I'm not great at Photoshop. And that's why the rudimentary way I do it is just the way I taught myself how to do it. But that's a good tip there. And then Tom says, just got back from Alaska. Yeah, I remember we talked on the phone not long ago, and you were telling me you were heading up that way. I've been to Alaska a lot this summer, so it's kind of like the second home for me. Cheryl says, what kind of tripod head do you use? It depends on the application that I'm using, Cheryl. If I am shooting pictures of wildlife, most often I'm using a gimbal head, and it just balances that big lens that I use on it better. If I'm shooting more static images, landscape or maybe even flowers, I'll use just a ball head. And the Really Right Stuff ball heads are good. If you need some equipment recommendations, you can send me an email and I can send you some exact links. But for the most part, any kind of ball head. I've got ball heads all the way from some old Bogans that I bought 25 years ago to some Vanguards, because I did a project with Vanguard bags and tripods a few years ago, and they sent me a bunch of stuff, and I've still got a bunch of their stuff I use. And then and I've got I had a really good tripod legs and head that got somehow left behind in Yellowstone where they're back in the spring that I was never able to find. So if you guys find a tripod, a Gitzo tripod legs and a Kirk gimbal head roaming around unattended in Yellowstone, if you're there, it's probably mine. He ran away from me and I'm not sure where he went to. So it just depends on the application. If I'm shooting video, I've got a fluid head, so that way you can pan and move the camera around fluidly. And so it just depends on the application that I use it for. So, but typically ball head or gimbal head is my first two choices. Yeah, so I don't know which. So Cheryl follows up with that. It says, my Manfrotto ball head doesn't stay locked in place well enough for focus stacking. Yeah, that's the problem with the ones I've got too. I recently tried a Really Right Stuff ball head. They're a little expensive, but when you lock them down, they stay locked down in place. And so if you've got the budget and you care to know, I'll share with you the model of that. And they've got, I've got a bigger Really Right Stuff ball head. They've got some different models too, but that's the thing that impresses me most about those Really Right Stuff ones is that, again, once you lock it down, it's going to stay locked down. And I don't think you have to worry about that focus stacking. John says, can you use the GoPro with the camera trap? Yes, you can with an asterisk. And here's the asterisk I'm going to use. I've actually got a guy, the company's called TRL Cam, and he's out of Nebraska, and he made me a passive infrared sensor for my camera that'll plug into any of my Canon cameras. And so I know he's got the capability of tinkering with those GoPros to be able to plug that for a camera trap. And so I don't think there's a native way of doing it, but I know that guy can make anything. I don't know him personally. I've just talked to him on the phone and kind of told him what I've wanted to do, but he can pretty much make anything. And so I know if there's a way to do it, he can do it. And it's called TRL Cam, like T, Tom, R, Robert, L, Lisa, cam.com. I think that's right. And looking at all these pictures of deer and bears and everything else have got me fired up about fall coming on. Cheryl asked, what do you think of the Acratech tripod heads? I don't know. I've never even heard of that brand, and that doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean they're not good. It just means I haven't heard of them. So that's interesting. I'm going to make a note of that, and I will, I'm going to check those out to see what they're about. Because again, I just haven't heard of them. I mean, all right. Does anybody have any further questions? I'll hang around here for just a second if any other questions come through. If not, again, here's my contact information. You don't have to go to my website. There's nothing there for sale necessarily. But again, if you've got any questions as we leave here today, follow up with me at russell@russellgraves.com. And I'll maybe a day or two before I get back to you, but I always respond to my emails just as a courtesy to people who care enough to take the time to write. I'm always going to care enough to take the time to write back, and I'll help you figure out whatever issues you may be having. So Cheryl says those Acratechs are pricey, but have been recommended. Yeah, I'm going to look them up, Cheryl. Like I said, I haven't heard of them before. Well, I think there's my last slide. So sunset means I am done. I don't see any other questions coming through. I appreciate everyone, your attentiveness and being willing to take part of your day and spend time here with me. I don't take that lightly because I know you got a million other things to do, and to take the time to sit here and listen to me and try to learn from my experiences. That means a lot to me. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. In the meantime, again, follow up with me if you have any questions. Hope to see some of you guys on a trip soon. And it seems like every time I go on a trip, the number of names I recognize on these webinars grow more and more, and that's a good thing. So I appreciate everybody, and hope to see you in the field really, really soon. Take care.